As most of you are aware, there was a huge unionizing effort at an Amazon warehouse facility in Bessemer, Alabama recently, and we got the result, and the effort was largely crushed. Amazon won in its efforts to stop the workers from unionizing, and I want to discuss why the outcome was what it was and what we can do to fix this going forward. So, first and foremost, I would like to outline three critical points. The first 2 points that I believe are basically minor inconveniences, but it's worth noting. And the third point is the most vital and the true reason as to why this unionizing effort failed. So, allow me to begin with the first point. The first point is Amazon's efforts and tactics to crush the movement. Now, if you don't know, I'll inform you here. Amazon used loads of money, loads of resources, loads of time, loads of strategies to upend this unionizing effort. Okay, unions, when it comes to unions and corporations, these institutions, they are diametrically opposed to each other. The corporation, the institution, wants to, keep as much profit as it can to feed itself, and the unions wants to fight on behalf of the workers and the workers' rights, and that is in direct opposition to the goals and the interests of the corporation. That's number one. They had many union busting tactics. I'm sure there were many methods of, to instill fear in the workers. And, they used different, like they had the Bessemer police over at the Amazon facility, I guess, to intimidate the people who were pro-union and what have you. And they would, vote no. They would hold meetings that were anti-union meetings and, the rest. I don't need to outline any more of it, but that's the first minor inconvenience. The second minor inconvenience is the lack of solidarity between the workers. So it's just on the merits of it easier for the company, for the institution to coalesce and say no and get the workers on their side to go against the union, because they're an established institution and they are all in it for the same reason. They all share the same interests. They all share the same goals. And the workers have been working for this institution for however long of a time, so there's some sort of relationship there. When the union comes around, the people that are, with the union, the labor movements and what have you, they have to basically pitch themselves to the workers and make, a savory enough of an argument to get the workers to come to their side and kind of make the workers antagonistic to their place of work if they aren't already. And that is difficult in its own right, and it's a very tedious task under capitalism. But that's the second minor inconvenience, the lack of solidarity. So the first, we had Amazon's union busting tactics. The second, we had the lack of solidarity between workers. And I've been seeing people kind of blaming the people that voted no, kind of blaming the workers, and I don't think that's fair. And I'll explain in my third point, which is the most vital reason why this unionizing effort ended in a failure. The third is the lack of teaching and a systematic failure of capitalism and of the United States of America. You see, in the first half of the 20th century, in the 1900s leading up until like the 1950s or around that time, unions were quite popular. Much more than they are today. Today, the amount of workers that are unionized is around 13%. Specifically, in 1940 through about 1945, 36% of the workforce was unionized. That's a substantial increase from what it is today. And followed by this unionization of the workforce and the legislation that was passed by FDR, the most progressive president in history, was followed by something called the golden age of economic expansion. And there's a reason for this. You see, when you join a union, there's something called collective bargaining, okay? And it's basically a defense mechanism that the workers can enact. They can come together, they can coalesce their solidarity, and instead of one worker going to the employer where he's powerless, a lot of workers can band together and fight for rights, better working condition, higher wages, whatever. And we see this in places such as Norway, for example. In Norway, if you weren't aware, there is no required minimum wage, at least at the federal. Like, there's no required minimum wage in Norway. You want to know why? Because they're heavily unionized. They have extremely powerful trade unions in Norway. And so they don't need a minimum wage because they're heavily unionized, and they can fight for higher wages through that method. And they do have higher wages. I mean, just look up how much McDonald's workers get paid in Norway. I think it's something around like $23, $24 or something ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely stunning what these people have accomplished in Norway, but that's neither here nor there. In America, after World War II, leading into the Cold War, there was a purge on the socialists, the communists, and anybody that was in association with anything like that, such as being on the left, And it was all because of, the Cold War, but the corporations banded together with the government to essentially upend these progressive movements and labor unions. It started with the Taft-Hartley Act that was passed in 1947 that was a detrimental piece of legislation aimed at upending labor unions, because that's exactly what it did. And so, I mean, they got rid of, like, a lot of people don't even know that there was socialist and communist parties in America. They have no idea because they were purged. They got rid of them, whether it was by deportation, whether it was by murder in some cases, or whatever. Scare tactics, scaring them out of town, and turning the people against them, whatever the case may be. They upended these movements one by one, and over time, it shaped the thinking of the people in America, and it shaped the thinking of the general public and their feeling towards labor unions. And there is no fight back in regards to an opposition to capitalism in this country, really. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of power that's put into cultivating the minds of people that the ways of capitalism are the correct one. But there is no opposition to that. I mean, we have growing movements on the left. We have the likes of Bernie Sanders and others that are trying to cultivate some sort of movement to kind of empower the workers and empower the labor force. But the labor force at large, at least as it pertains to today, do not have allies with the kind of power that the institutions that they work for do when it comes to these different corporations that are backed by the government entities that want to crush labor movements and enrich themselves. Okay? There are no powerful, the AFL and CIO isn't what it was, however many decades ago, when it was a very prominent thing in American society. And what we can do to change this is, moving forward, educate ourselves, educate everyone else, create mass movements, hold meetings and everything to get people up to speed on what these unionized workplaces could look like, and what solidarity within the workforce can do for the individual. Because, especially here in the Deep South, those people, they don't really know. And you can't really blame them for voting no, when you have your employer telling you one thing and you have a person that's, from a unionizing drive telling you another. You never met this person in your life, and their tactics might not be the best. But I think that it should be eye-opening for everyone that is pro-union and want to increase the power of the labor force, because this is only the beginning. I don't think this should deter or will deter people from fighting to unionize. All across Europe, as it pertains to Amazon specifically, they have unions. They're heavily unionized across Europe. And, there's not a single union as it pertains to Amazon here in America, but that can change. And I do believe it will change, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of effort in order to get there.